Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to the Sports Spectrum Podcast. This is episode number 79, and my name's Jason Romano. It's wonderful to have you joining us here on the program today. As always, you can download this podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and everywhere podcasts are found. And of course, you can find all of our content over at sportsspectrum.com, where we put out a daily devotional every single morning at 6 a.m. to get your day started right. So check it all out at sportsspectrum.com. And of course, subscribe to this podcast. Go to your Apple or Android device, go on the podcast app and click that subscribe button. That allows you to never miss an episode when we release one here on the Sports Spectrum Podcast. And if you're a YouTube person, go to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is where every single podcast that we put out is found. We have those there. We also have a ton of video content. We just got back from Super Bowl 52 in Minneapolis and posted a ton of content over at our YouTube channel. We got to talk to a lot of players from both the Eagles and the Patriots and really kind of go in depth on their faith and their journey to playing in the Super Bowl, which was a crazy game, by the way. The Eagles winning that Super Bowl was just insane. Awesome game, and fly, Eagles, fly. The Eagles bringing that championship back to Philadelphia. Today's guest on the podcast, and today's podcast is a little different than the ones we've done before, but our guest is actor Taylor James, who plays the iconic title role in PureFlix's new biblical epic, the new movie Samson, which releases Friday, February 16th in theaters everywhere. And the reason this podcast is different is for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it's a shorter podcast. It's only about 15 minutes long. Taylor made himself available, kind of did a press tour, and we had about 15 minutes to interview him. So that's one of the reasons. The second is because it's an actor, and we don't normally have actors on our podcast, but I figure Sports Spectrum's this podcast has been out for less than a year still, and we're still trying new things and bringing you guys different guests, and we wanted to try this. We thought it would be interesting to talk to Taylor about making a movie and just kind of what that was like, and we also talk sports with him as well. But normally on this podcast, you hear athletes and you hear stories of sports and faith and people in the sports business, whether they're coaches, whether they're broadcasters. So we wanted to try something different here with Taylor, and we hope you guys like it. If you don't like it or you do like it or whatever, please email us, and I'll give you my email on the back end of this podcast, and let us know what you think, because I really enjoyed talking to Taylor. I thought he was very insightful. I thought his interview was good, and I definitely think he paints a great picture of the role of Samson. I've got a chance to screen this movie myself, and I really enjoyed it. I think you guys will as well. So Samson, again, releases February 16th from PureFlix, and I'm excited to bring you this interview. He is actor Taylor James. Take a listen to our interview right here on the Sports Spectrum Podcast. And we welcome Taylor to Sports Spectrum. How are you, Taylor?
I'm very good, thank you, Jason, and thanks for the welcome.
It is wonderful to talk to you. I'm excited about Samson. I got to preview a clip of the movie, and I really enjoyed it. It was a fun movie. It was entertaining. It was educational. All of those things that you would hope to get in a movie. Tell us how you got involved with the film.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you had such a great response, and I hope, and I'm pretty sure everybody else will as well. How I got involved in the film, other than the typical email from the management team telling me I had an opportunity to audition for the role, that's the standard procedure. But from there, it was in that moment I realized how much I wanted it, and I had to be involved with the project. I had a connection to the material and the character, Samson's story, one of such power. And when Bruce, the director of the film, and I spoke, we forgot about the business of work. We simply got lost into the message behind Samson in storytelling, in our love of art and passion. And we forged a relationship, a chord that couldn't be broken. And I think it might have been even like an hour in the supposed casting before the casting and producers nudged Bruce in the direction of auditioning me for the part. He had seen some tapes, and it was a couple of auditions down the line. But when we eventually got to speak, it just created a connection that I think, well, I know was unbreakable, because I got the part, and Bruce and I speak pretty much a couple of times a week.
That's awesome. Now, you're playing one of the more iconic figures in the Bible. How did you prepare for this role? I mean, you're jacked, by the way, in this film. So I wonder how you prepared for this role.
Okay, so when I say the word smoke and mirrors, please don't think it's all just smoke and mirrors. There is a lot of hard work that goes into being physically strong. And I'm no stranger to the gym. However, it is the leanness that I searched for within Samson that makes him look even more powerful. And I say that on camera, if you're a very bulky guy, that size is not so obvious to audience members as somebody who's very lean. It is the definition of the muscles that comes across more impressive on the screen. So I was aware of that on a physical note and on a filmmaker's note. And it also linked with my thought on how Samson should be as a person. It's too obvious to audiences if Samson is the size of a house, you know, a linebacker.
Right.
We don't have American football over here, but a linebacker for a football team, that he can lift a house and he can carry a cow on his back and a whole village on his back. And you don't really question where he gets his strength from. But if someone is leaner, which I was fascinated in, Samson's strength is more questionable, and it, coming from God, it is more exciting. And also his people struggle in the film. They starve. So I think it's a little unfair that Samson's the only person in the village who gets to have 3 meals a day. So I made sure that in Taylor's life I fast as well on a daily basis. I fast between 18 hours most days, sometimes 36. My longest fast is 120 hours, and that's abstaining from food. So I made sure I carried that into the preparation, into the continued preparation, I should say, Jason, of my physicality with Samson.
How hard was that fasting? I fasted a couple times, and I had just for a few days, and that was difficult. What was that like?
If I go on too long, just tell me.
No problem.
Fasting for me isn't a difficulty. There's a hormone called Ghrelin, and that's your basic starvation hunger response that says, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And it's like a child. And, you know, you can let the child be spoilt, or you can train the child to, when I say train, I don't mean train, but you can teach the child that the hunger will pass and that you cannot get always what you want at that exact time. And I have learned to control my hormones a little bit better than, let's say, the next person. So I don't find it so difficult. Plus, I also know why I'm doing it. And when you have a rationale of whatever you're embarking on, I don't think it's so difficult. So for me, fasting came hand in hand with it. And there's a very famous saying, I can't remember who said it to me, but you starve the ego to feed the soul. And I feel very rich when I fast, and I feel very full. And I also knew that it was doing it for my art. So I was happy to sacrifice and suffer on those occasional moments that I did feel a little peckish.
Taylor James is here joining us on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Taylor, of course, the lead character role that he is playing for the movie Samson, coming out February 16th from PureFlix. Taylor, I wonder what you learned about the story of Samson that maybe you didn't realize before you stepped into this role. What did you learn?
I was reminded, but the major one thing I learned that is God is willing to forgive us no matter how many times we sin or fail. And nothing was greater within Samson's story than that. That at the end of the film, after being blinded by his pride and, you know, arrogance and being physically strong in the beginning, he is weak, he's physically blinded, and his humility and his submission, sacrifice, willingness to God ultimately gives him the greatest strength. And I feel that was the one thing that I was reminded of, just God's willingness to forgive. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Now, I wonder, because you filmed this movie, a lot of it in South Africa, if not all of it, what advantages did that offer to you as a location? Because when you watch it, it's a beautiful looking film. It definitely, you feel like you're back in the days, the old biblical times. So I wonder what that advantage, if anything, did it offer shooting it in South Africa?
Purely that. It gave us an advantage that we didn't have to film things in a studio and in build sets. I mean, we did, and we did film inside, but for the most part of the film, 2/3, we simply used the beautiful landscape that was there in South Africa to our advantage. And it makes it more believable, not just for actors, but for audiences. And I think a lot of South Africa is unspoilt and untouched. And not to say to do a film in New York is easy, but when you do a film in New York, we've seen New York a lot. And there's a huge part of the world that we haven't seen, and that's what makes film wonderful. But also there's a huge part of South Africa that we haven't seen. And I feel that the landscape and the climate lent to the world of Samson so easily. The other advantage is that the people there are so hardworking and passionate and willing to learn and kind, and that is conducive to a great work ethic and a great result, which you've just said is prevalent and is witnessed in the film.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful film to watch. It really is. I'm excited for our audience to see it. Now, Taylor, this is a sports podcast, so I wonder, are you a sports fan? And if so, what sports are you most into? Do you most pay attention to?
Of the American sports, which actually was my major one passion growing up, it would be basketball. I am a huge basketball fan. I'm not too shabby on the court as well, so I reckon I could run a couple of people for their money. But I grew up playing basketball. It was my pre-school bell. It was my lunchtime break, and it was my post-school homework. And basketball was huge for me. Sadly, I didn't have the internet wasn't so huge when I was young, so I couldn't follow the NBA as much as I can do now. But yeah, basketball is my big thing, and just having an awareness of fitness and a passion. That's it as well. I do love cardio and I do love resistance training to strengthen my own body, but recreationally, yeah, I love the NBA.
Now, just a couple questions left here with Taylor James, the actor for the new movie Samson. I wonder, Taylor, for you, tell us about why Samson's character can still be relevant to a movie audience today in 2018.
Samson's story, it's powerful. The message is very powerful. His story of power, how he lost it and regained it, that's hugely relevant for audiences today. To see the themes that go throughout the film, the emotions, loyalty, honor, temptation, vulnerability, consequence of choice. We all face that as humans. And the power of a good story is timeless and, therefore relevant always. We have a choice to learn from others' experience in life, be it by observation or be it by our own trial and, dare I say, error. And I think if you are willing to take home the various messages within the story of Samson, certain things will resonate with certain people. And that's why I feel it's hugely relevant, because it's such a diverse story. And I don't think there's anything out there at the moment which can really compete with that. And that's what I find also exciting about it.
Yeah, I love the idea of Samson being this big, strong guy that loves his people and wants, good to happen and protecting his people, but at the same time, sort of has this inner struggle, has this sort of, just this sort of sensitive, sort of simple side to himself.
We all do. It's that conflict, and to watch it it's beautiful. It really is, to see how someone deals with the challenge in front of them.
Taylor, when people go and see this movie, what would you want them to be talking about after they come out of the theater? What is sort of, if you were to pick one thing and say, okay, Taylor, what am I going to get out of seeing this movie? Talk to our audience and tell them what you hope that they would be talking about after going and seeing Samson.
Jason, I'm going to have to say I really hope that audiences have conflicting views. It just makes life a little bit more exciting and fun. Yeah. And it also shows the art that's within the story, that anyone can glean any moment from the film that resonates within them. For me, though, my ultimate wish is that people see the reluctance within Samson, how he didn't want to walk the path that was chosen for him or bestowed upon him, and how he struggled and battled with all these obstacles that came along, and then ultimately his redemption at the end. So the reluctant hero, I would say, that flawed hero that led to the redemption, and I don't want to say victory, but ultimate sacrifice and an ultimate reward, I suppose.
The movie is Samson, releasing February 16th from PureFlix Entertainment, and he is Taylor James, the actor playing the iconic title role of the new movie Samson. It's coming out soon. We're excited for it, and we're excited for you, Taylor James. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sports Spectrum, and we hope to catch up with you again soon.
Thank you, Jason.
And we do appreciate Taylor James, actor from the new movie Samson, releasing in theaters February 16th. We appreciate Taylor joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. That movie is really good. I can tell you, I saw it and it's awesome. I got to see a screening, sort of a preview screening of it, and really enjoyed it. Can't recommend it enough. February 16th, it's in theaters everywhere. You can get your tickets at tickets.samson.movie, or of course Fandango or anywhere else tickets are found. You can get the tickets and go see Samson in theaters February 16th from PureFlix. And I really believe this, as many of the people who listen to this podcast are believers in Jesus, and we're looking for positive, sort of faith-based family movies that we can take the whole family to. Samson's one of them. Obviously, there's a lot of action and there's a lot of things that happen, we'll say, in the movie, but I've seen it, and it's definitely something I would let my daughter see. I definitely recommend it. The boys will love it. They'll love the fighting and the action. Samson is in theaters February 16th. And again, a different type of podcast than we've done before. So I really want to hear your guys' feedback on this. Jason at sportspectrum.com. You can email me, because I'm very curious to see if you like this interview, if this is the type of content you want to continue to hear on the podcast. We like to change it up a little bit, switch it up. So we're always going to be focusing on sports, but occasionally changing it up with an actor or somebody different, a musician, something like that, I think is fun and different. And hopefully you guys liked it. As always, you can reach us on Twitter at sports_spectrum. You can reach me at Jason Romano. You can also email us, jason@sportspectrum.com, and find us on Twitter and on Instagram as well, and YouTube, of course, with every single podcast we release. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast.